And I'd like to start this conversation by talking about some of the technical aspects of Zammitt's work, the rigor and the systematic nature of his research. And Laura, I'd like to start with you. And I have a few questions for you to start this conversation. And first of all, I would like to know how you first encountered the work of Norman Zammitt.
Okay, I'm happy to answer that. Thank you for the question. I grew up in Los Angeles, and as a teenager, I was living in the area of LACMA, and a relative who was married to a curator at LACMA had encouraged me to go see a show. And I'm well in my 50s, so it was the 80s. It was 1986. And the show was called The Spiritual in Art. And the show felt, for so many people, so out of place. It was the era of Reagan. It was the dynamic of discussing the spiritual it was almost an obscene idea. But Tuchman, who actually had an incredible background with scientific investigations with the artists and had showcased Norman Zammitt through many of the 60s showcases that they presented at LACMA, had really created something that had a massive impact. I had an experiential response. I entered a territory of phenomenology that I didn't really know I could have with a work of art. So it made a deep impression. And then later in life, I went to a party, which was in Boyle Heights, and it was a blacklight theme. And this was where Norman's masterpiece, Elysium, was painted. It was his former studio. And much in the vein that artists like Hilma F. Klint had conceived of having a temple at one point, this was almost a maquette for a sanctuary that he wanted to see conceived. And it was an amazing experience once again, and then I felt like the universe was just leading me on a journey to investigate him more.
Thank you, that's beautiful. And as the art historian in the group, I want to ask you if you don't mind maybe spending a couple of minutes contextualizing his work in the context of the light and space movement, the Finnish fetish movement, and in general abstraction in California.
Well, I mean, art historians, and I mean, there's lots of isms, and Norman preferred not to be enveloped into an ism per se, but there's so much dialogue between the light and space movement that he really is placed there because he ultimately belongs there. As a young student, as students are encouraged to explore the masters, he recreated works, explored Rembrandt, and that's where his investigations into illumination and light began. But more so, he was in a city that was the aerospace capital, the industrial war complex, manufacturing nexus. So he had a lot of technology interests and was really interested in the evolution happening with post-war declassified materials. So he was really a pioneer with all the plastics that were coming out in Los Angeles at the time. And much like all of the aerospace developments from vacuum coating that Larry Bell was exploring, he became very masterful in seeking new ideas that he would develop the technology to execute. So he also, in terms of Finnish fetish is kind of a controversial, charged term. It really came out of the automotive fetish of Los Angeles for automotive paints and decals and this having something just be immaculate. And yet, of course, that is what the light and space artists strived for, and particularly Norman sought the the immaculate. So from a technological standpoint, he really belongs in this category.
And you mentioned some of the sort of techniques and methodologies that he used to achieve this incredible rigor of forms and colors. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about I remember reading that he came up with his own kind of early computer programs to devise progressions of colors, and he had many other devices that perhaps you cannot talk about because they're secret, but maybe there is something that you can share with us that allowed him to achieve this perfection of forms and colors.
Sure. So Norman Zammitt was really seeking to invoke the experience of a sunset or the aura that emanates in esoteric ideals. He used, much like many artists have gravitated towards Pythagorean theories, he gravitated towards the idea that the logarithmic calculations and the parabola would allow him to arrive at the gradations of the natural, the natural wonders of what we experience in a sunset or a celestial encounters. And within seeking to reproduce wonder, he also found that mathematics couldn't be solely the only modality to achieve that. He also invoked a process of intuition, which I call a wobble, because it's sort of a wobble on mathematics per se. And this wobble allowed him, in his own personal intuitive process, to create something that could never be reproduced. I don't even think AI might be able to penetrate, the secrets. So yeah, he merges scientific rigor and mathematical approaches with something that only humans have, which is the capacity to enter the mystical. And I think we can't forget how to do that. So.
And he was also very precise in the use of pigments and
yes.
and the amount of grams of pigments that went in each band. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yes. So working with acrylic, which dries so quickly, he would, with the logarithmic process, he would weigh the pigments on a gram scale that was like 1/1000th, and it was really a progression he achieved through careful weighing. So it's even national periodicals had reviewed him as a Leonardo da Vinci of his time, because he had been so rigorous and methodical in developing his desire to achieve the luminous effects that you see here.
Thank you. And Sarah, I'm going to go to you. Thank you so much for participating in the talk. I know that you're not necessarily super familiar with the work, but we're very excited to actually hear your perspective on Zammitt, and also maybe some relationship or oppositions with your own work. And I'd like to talk about a specific space within his canvases, which is the space in which two colors meet. I think Laura mentioned that he had many different tools that allowed him to be as precise as we see, but some of these tools, I believe there was a special taping machine that allowed him to create these bands, but also the colors were not necessarily adjacent, but they were kind of overlapping. So there was almost like a human quality in it, and not just like a very mechanical or artificial sense. And I was wondering whether you can comment on that, and also thinking about a similar space in your own work or in your own paintings in which two colors meet or two pieces of canvases meet. A liminal space.
Yes, definitely. Those are interesting questions. As I'm sitting here and I'm looking out at the exhibition, my eye goes to the painting to the to the left, to the right of me, and the painting to the left of me, and there is something happening that's very physical, and it's an optical effect, and it makes me think of Bridget Riley's early works, and there's a movement that's happening, and I'm sort of trying to figure out how that's happening with just stripes of color. Obviously, there's a mathematical explanation, and it's all very precise, and I don't even know if that's the most interesting thing to me. What to me is interesting is how it makes me feel, and it's curious. It's very destabilizing, but they're all very beautiful. My favorite is the green one in the other room, which is this slow gradient from turquoise into bright blue at the bottom. It's so mysterious. But anyway, I was thinking about what you were saying about Finnish fetish and Southern California. I also grew up in Southern California, and those figures are very important to me, those artists. And I was thinking about Robert Irwin as a person who started out painting, and then his work became slowly, I'm sure you all know Robert Irwin's work, but slowly dematerialized into these environments and spaces, and suddenly there was no work left at all, and it was just about the body in a space. Like, when I think of Robert Irwin, that's what I think of how I think of his trajectory. But anyway, the sense of the body as being very important in this work, and I'm just talking about how I'm trying to describe how it feels to see these beautiful objects, and I also think that the scale is super important. I'm also an artist who thinks about scale in my work, architectural scale, and I'm working with stage design and doing backdrops and so on. So I'm thinking always about our physical body as it relates to these paintings, and especially with the scale, you can't help think about architecture. But you asked about the space between the
and also
colors.
what happens also in your own work.
Yeah, and so in my own work, I paint, it's paint on canvas, but the hard edges are created through a sewn line. I use a sewing machine to join two bodies of color together. I think of it more as object making rather than, painting or image making. Even though I am using the techniques of a painter, I'm also using the techniques of a tailor or a builder, maybe. And with the tile works, there are bodies of color joined by grout instead of thread. But the space between those bodies is super important, and I guess the way that I think of it is a form of drawing. And my work, and my approach is much more intuitive than mathematical, so I don't connect so much with his process, but...
How much is planned in your own work?
Less and less, not the older I get, the more experienced I am.
Yeah.
The
younger.
The younger I get, the more I trust my intuition, and I move away from math, and I move away from geometry, and more freehand and sort of feelings-based, let's say.
And Jeremy, welcome. It's great to see you, and congratulations on your incredible award. And I'd love to expand a little bit on the technical aspect of your own practice. I think there is what you have in common with Zammitt is a sort of decent degree of technical fluency, which of course appears in very different modality in your work, in your incredibly woven surfaces, and here in the band paintings. But I'm curious to hear you talk about how you balance the technical aspects of your work with a more intuitive process of deciding colors and shapes when it comes to the general forms.
Okay, yeah, the thing that immediately comes to mind is the wobble. It's, I think it's that human intuition, that intuitiveness of the artist, and and much like his work, there's so much time that goes into the work, and basketry is no different than that. I have to design the palette first, because you have to make a basket, right? So my works build off one after another, and I didn't set out to do what he set out to do, but I ended up similar, just because of the evolution of the work. Originally, I didn't work in color at all, I worked natural tones or black and white. But as I started developing new techniques and patterns, I found that you could really accentuate the idea of like the pieces are moving. When you use color and shape, you can make them move even more on a three-dimensional surface. Maybe not more, but in a different way. My work is naturally going to be geometrically stable because of what it is. So this is really impressive, like the straight line work and the fades, which is something I've been experimenting with myself in my recent stuff, is sort of fading color gradations. I'm really doing a major color exploration right now. So in many ways, this show is really inspiring for that.
Have you ever made a painting?
A couple, yeah.
No?
Yeah, I've made a few. It was a while ago. Well, I have this embossing. We did this embossing. It's a printing process where I ran the prints through a printer,
Sure.
and I did paint one of those. So it was embossment that was painted. So that was fun getting back into it. But no, when I just walking around the show, if you stare at some of these pieces, they pulse and they move, and it's all about that color, and your eyes trying to make sense, trying to make patterns. So I mean, similar to some of my works, when you look at these works, you could stand next to someone and look at this work with them, and you're both going to see something different at the exact same moment. That's really special.
And maybe you can expand a little bit on the idea of color. For Zammitt, he famously said that he was more interested in how colors mix on his glass palette than how they looked on canvas. And so he began actually painting on glass and then on plexi sheets and then making these great sculptures that are made of layers of plexi where you can read an image as you look through, almost like a three-dimensional painting. So he really thought about color as profoundly connected to the way the light hits the color and the viewer perceive the color. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about how you select your own colors in your baskets, if they have a meaning. And I think what's striking about your own work is how you really need to be in the presence of the object in front of you to really appreciate the dynamism of the surface and how the colors and the angles and the points dialogue. So maybe you can talk a little bit about color in your own work.
Well, with color for me, I didn't start off doing it, and I've known a lot about color because I've painted and drawn my whole life. But again, when I think about using color on basketry versus using color on canvas, is you have these three-dimensional protrusions, but you also have a curved surface. And so when you put those together, you can have that surface change the color as you go past the work or as you're standing in front of the work. So it'll almost be iridescent, or depending on your color choices. Like if you use multiple versions of the same color, you can make it look like a hologram almost. But and then you can use other colors that really wouldn't go good together at all, but at one angle, the front weave will completely cover up the back color, and another angle will make it pop through, and you just, it's such a fun, it's just such a fun thing to do under the three dimensions. I was speaking with an artist the other day in the studio who's been working on, he's been working with color, but he's on flat surfaces, and I said, what if you weren't working on a flat surface? Like, what if your canvas had texture in a different way, where you could now cover up color at certain angles, and just brainstorming, like, how do you take a basket and make it no longer a basket, but use the same principles that I was able to pick up, but put them on a different surface? I just think that's such a neat idea.
And you were mentioning just before the talk started that you were, I don't know if it's confidential, but you were actually experimenting with other materials, and we were talking about bronze and maybe metal. How do you think of color on surfaces that usually are not painted or are not?
Well, it seems basketry is quite intricate, and so when you can, and where it's multiple dimensional, if you can color the material beforehand and then put it together, you can get precise coloration at different depths. Whereas if you're trying to patina bronze, I think it's going to be fairly complex to have multiple layers of color. on something that's a solid, like that's bronze, because you're getting behind things and around things. But no, the whole idea of that is growing beyond the wood into something more permanent and something that can be in more spaces, more places.
And does the combination of colors on your basket have a specific meaning, or how do you go about choosing the different colors? Are they traditional colors? Or?
So my basic principle to my art is more about aesthetic beauty and just the feeling that you get from form and beauty. More than, I mean, I think that's a really good thing to do, just bring beauty into the world.
Absolutely.
And so the color is the same thing.
Yeah. And Sarah, do you want to maybe expand a little bit on the choice of colors in your own work? And, we were talking about how mathematical every choice in these paintings is, and your work is almost the opposite. It's very intuitive. But I wonder also if you ever give yourself rules as an artist or in the studio.
No, I don't think I do. Maybe I do, but I'm not admitting it. But no, I have piles and piles of painted canvas in my studio. And I work on the floor, and I kind of start by throwing color down on the floor and moving it around, arranging it, sort of making giant collages on the floor. A lot of the compositions come from castaway shapes or negative shapes from other paintings that I've made, that I might have made. And so I have these kind of like accidental shapes that I hold on to, that I keep in my studio, and then those somehow work their way into a new composition, let's say.
Shaped them before?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I really don't
Asking
like.
for the secrets.
No, but I don't have like a methodology in the way that I think Norman Zammitt definitely did. But I guess the one system or one thing that I do that is constant is I make scale patterns. I make a composition on a large scale piece of paper using pattern paper.
With the same color.
Yes, and so then I cut out those shapes, and then those get.
Any surprise when you translate the paper
completely.
model to?
Because when you're working, when you work the way that I do, it's not sort of like there's a flat surface that I'm painting and I'm looking at the image as I'm making it. I make it, as I said, on the floor or through the sewing machine, and so it's all this big bunch of mushed up color, like a John Chamberlain, let's say. And then when it's stretched around the stretcher bars, and then it's put on the wall, then that's the only time I see what I'm doing, but I don't know until I've done it, if that makes sense. I have to like do that in order to see it, and then I like it or I don't, and it comes down off I unstretch it, I redo it, whatever. But.
Do you ever see your paintings or your installations as landscapes?
No.
Okay. But that's okay.
That's a good question. But I would say as spatial experiments, but not so much landscape.
Well, many people read these paintings that are surrounding us as landscape, thinking about the southwestern lights, horizons, and sunsets. So I want to come back to you, Laura, and ask you, how do you think his work challenges the sort of traditional binary between rational and sort of minimal approach and the sublime or the more phenomenological quality of these paintings? How did you think about these two poles?
Well, when you say phenomenology or you had also were thinking about possibly exploring connections to Irwin and Terrell. I think what is very significant, about Zammitt is there's this triangulation happening. He has his formative years experienced on a First Nation reservation near Montreal, part of the Mohawk Nation. And he's informed by this symbolic lexicon of color and understanding that color has a language and meaning. And then, of course, being in Los Angeles, he is exposed to this history of the transcendentalists. There was a lot of color practitioners that were correlated to the idea of color having alternate meaning. So then coming to Santa Fe, he then embeds the history of the Transcendentalist painting group, which of course they really wanted to achieve the phenomenology of nature, but also invoke properties of Mayan mathematics. And I think within this triangulation of influence, he developed a phenomenology that almost fused the archetypal symbolic language that is associated with color and the contrasts of certain colors put together. There seems to be universal meanings that he was exploring. Was that?
Do you read also the paintings as a sort of hint to natural phenomena?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of these really pertain to Los Angeles. And what's such a paradox about Los Angeles is we have the most phenomenal sunsets. And you know why? It's the smog. Yes.
I didn't know that.
The smog creates this atmospheric approach that is destructive, but yet at the end of the day, we sit there mesmerized by just its glory and recalibrated by it. So Norman was exploring, every different place on the planet has a different light, and particularly, as the seasons change. But there's also hemispheric properties, like I was thinking that Buffalo, where he did live for a time, had a more of a blue light, which is conditional to not such populated areas and the cold and the refractions of clouds. Santa Fe, of which Cecilia has just done an incredible show of Zammitt's earlier work, that's a whole different, found a whole nother spectra to explore. So I know that a lot of the paintings are really trying to capture that essence, that luminous essence that is particular to a region. So.
And Jeremy, sort of expanding what Laura said, there has often been speculation about his native ancestry, how he might have informed his abstraction, particularly when it comes to color and language and place. Zammitt's mother was from the Mohawk Nation, and they lived in a reservation near Montreal for many years before coming to California. I wonder if, when you look at these paintings, do you see a connection with indigenous crafts, like textile weavings and other form of pattern making? Especially, I look at sometimes a painting like the one to your right or some in the other room.
So, yeah, I definitely get a sense of it, but it's more, it's interesting. When you go to a reservation, any reservation in the country, if you grew up on a reservation, it feels like your home. The homes are decorated the same. Color choices and palettes are so similar. I mean, you could be in Maine or you could be in Alaska, which is, it's a cultural thing. But what really comes to mind with me when I look at this work in particular is like ribbon dresses that the women dance with, and the color choices and the striping. There's definitely native influence there. I don't know if it was intentional or if it was just how he grew up. Even the three-dimensional pieces on the wall have, it just takes me back to the regalia more than anything.
That's interesting. And do you also see these large paintings as landscape as well?
I can see that. The sunsets, for sure. But I think some of them can be something else entirely. But this, I keep looking at this one over here, and it does look just like a sunset.
And what do you think about the scale? Because I want to ask both Jeremy and Sarah. There is an interesting example here. We have very, very, very small paintings. juxtaposed to quite large-scale works, especially around us. So I'm curious for you to reflect on how he moved from scale quite radically, from very minimal to quite expansive. And if you think that scale was a way for him to, to involve the viewer, to create a more environmental gesture than just an abstraction.
Yeah, I think when there's a painting that's this large, that's 16 feet wide or something like that, that's pretty big, and that's something that you have to read with your body. I mean, that's not something you can just look at and keep your body still. You have to walk up to it. You have to, if you want to read it, like left to right, right to left, there's a movement that you have to do something with your body. And I think that is, I don't want to say forcing, but inviting participation. It makes it more of an installation. It makes it more architectural, of course. Whereas the intimate, smaller paintings don't invite so much that experience. Is a more intimate, one-on-one, quiet experience, I would say. It's interesting that he didn't make any paintings that were in between. Like I just see these tiny ones, and I see the very, very large ones. Does anyone know if he did make abstract paintings that are 4 feet? I wonder.
The work that we have in Santa Fe is a different size, but it's also completely different work. Yes, yeah. It's not abstraction. So,
I mean, I will say, like, I've started doing work, as I said before, with the stage and making like quite large scale, like the largest paintings I've ever made in my life. 25 feet high and hanging and on the floor and moving and working with dance. And it is something pretty incredible to see what bodies can do with a painting, and how the painting can inform the dance, and how the dance can inform the body. And the same thing goes for music, because there was music involved too. For me, it's been like totally mind-blowing. But scale, I think, is something that
was a gradual move towards larger paintings?
For me it was, yeah. And so it's just been now it's this whole other like job that I have. I actually think of it like a job, but in the best way. Yeah. It's like a part of the painting practice, but it's actually totally different because it's collaborative. Anyway, but that's a tangent. Back to this. That's why these speak to me as backdrops.
And Jeremy, can you reflect a little bit on the scale, also in relationship to your own work?
Well, I think, and I think the larger scale is definitely what is partially contributing to the idea that they're landscapes. Mm-hmm. Because you look out over the horizon. I mean, if you stand close enough to that, it'll take in your entire peripheral. I know for me, I'm drawn to the larger works, not intentionally, but I was asking someone earlier, what's your favorite piece in here? And they came to this little tiny thing. And for some reason, I'm just not drawn to them. They're wonderful pieces, but it's just having that your sight line's being enveloped by something, and it's just, I feel like it plays with the eye more, and I get that sense of movement and that sense of energy out of the larger pieces only because they are taking up so much of your sight line.
Do you think there is something cinematic about them?
I don't know if it's cinematic. Maybe. It's overwhelming, which I like. So.
I want to switch and talk a little bit about the sort of spiritual value of some of these paintings. I think one of the historical limitations of including his work or reading his work in the context of the Light and Space movement is the focus on technicalities and abstraction. But I love to move a little bit beyond this, and in particular, as we sit in this special room surrounded by these three large-scale paintings, I can't not think about almost like a religious atmosphere, like a chapel, like the Agnes Martinsen Chapel in Taos. There is something that taps into a deeper human, almost religious dimension. So starting with you, Laura, I'd love for you to reflect on something that Zammitt says about the pursuit of light through color was described as a spiritual inquiry. And so I'm curious for you to just talk a little bit about what you think he was trying to embed these paintings with, and also in relationship with other artists like Turrell or Irwin that also achieved another dimension through their work.
Right. I mean, Zammitt their approaches are very different. Their intentions are very, very different. The luminosity that he sought to achieve Turrell really works with the Gansfield approach, where there's this kind of perfect field of vision with color is saturated, and we become almost disembodied in our ability to perceive where we are in space, and everything disambiguates. Norman, and then of course Irwin is really he's really exploring the faculties of conditional art, like exploring how we become aware of our own perceptual processes. So when Sarah was speaking about the body, it's like, yes, we should be observing his work from all points in space. But Zammitt is static. He wants you generally with the band paintings to really stand and allow the light to emerge from the color. And when there is fluidity, but that's actually his optical understanding of how we almost, our brains are set up to create something, to feel that something's in flux when actually it's static, but that's achieved through the careful selections of what colors go next to each other. If you get close to the paintings, there's a small layer of one band to the next. That's not what's achieving the optical kind of almost kinetic effect. It's actually the choice of the colors and the way that we're processing them. Turrell and Irwin and Zammitt all had very different approaches and objectives, but basically they do transform the way perception is evaluated. And I think that is a mystical and spiritual goal, because how can we as a society change our behaviors and our closed-minded thinking unless we explore how perception frames our patterns. So what is amazing about how all of these artists are interconnected is there was a spiritual objective to transform society through thinking about perceptual processes.
And Jeremy, do you want to maybe expand on that and just maybe reflecting if you find a spiritual charge in these works? And also I'm curious, as an artist who works long hours on very detailed and methodical work, if you also find sort of the ritual and the gesture of making, the art of making, also a sort of form of meditation. And I imagine that he spent many, many hours also making these very precise works in the studio.
Yeah, speaking to the idea of the light, I'm drawn to the lack of color, like the whites. It's like that overwhelming push of sunlight in your eyes, or just it washes out the yellow and it becomes, it just, if you stare long enough, the white gets brighter and brighter and brighter. It's like you're looking at it, but no. What was the first part of the question?
The first question was if you find there is a spiritual charge or aspect in this painting, and then in these paintings, in the work in general, and then if you think the ritual of making this, in your case, your basket, in this case, these very elaborate color patterns, also is a form of meditation, or?
No, I think it certainly is. Weaving certainly is. I get lost in it a lot of times, and I always have like a vision in the end, and you can tell these were the same way. He had a vision when he started, and I think he knew exactly where he was going. I mean, I would guess that. For me, it's like that anyway, and weeks and weeks of work just to slowly watch it come together. I think my favorite part of that entire meditation is when you sit back, because you're so close. When you finally finish the piece and you stand back and you look at it and then compare that to what the ultimate vision was originally. And sometimes it exceeds it. Most of the time I hit it, and rarely I don't want to finish a piece, but it's an additive process, big time.
Do you work alone?
I weave my stuff alone. I do have studio assistants now, but they're not really. Recently I've been working with people in the studio, which is nice. We can joke around.
Is it also a form of healing, the process for you?
Originally, that's exactly why I wove, was for healing. Yeah, I had just gone through a major change in my life, and I took baskets up, and I sort of put all that pain and just need into it, and it made me feel better. And then the more I did it, I felt even better. And then after a while, it just became what I did.
Still feeling good?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. No, it's a healer, that's for sure.
What about for you, Sarah? Do you want to share your thoughts about the sort of spiritual aspect of this work, but also in general for you, if you think art is a form of healing?
Definitely, absolutely. I was thinking, because I was reading your notes and the question about if you have a sense of spiritual intensity in your practice, and I was thinking about making the paintings not so much, it's meditative, but not so spiritual. I mean, this is all getting very intimate conversation here. But there is the moment, and I think, Jeremy, you know what I'm talking about, when when the work is done and it's on the wall and you sit back and you're looking at it. And I have the studio, which has these two really big skylights in the ceiling, and no matter what, every day of the year, no matter if it's morning or evening, the light is always different. And so these shapes of light come from the skylight and they move across the studio. And sometimes, if it's a sunny day, it'll move across the painting like that. I'm not sitting there for 6 hours watching the light move, but like if I turn around, I'll be like, oh, that's a new composition. Like the light that cast on the monochrome painting actually made a new painting right there. Sure. And then like I'll turn around 20 minutes later and it looks totally different. And it's so cool. How can I sound smart by talking about this?
Cool is
It's just really cool. And it's kind of like, you're like, oh, this is why I'm doing it. This is the moment, right?
So I have these moments in the studio where I think about, because I've had designs come to me out of nowhere that I shouldn't be able to do. And I always think back to ancestry and like just innate genetic knowledge or spiritual knowledge, whatever you want to call it. But this like, I've had overwhelming feelings of like someone else is there saying what's possible and helping me make these things, which is a bit intense, but yeah, I don't know. Sometimes they turn out better than I ever could have imagined, and most of the time it is meditative. So you're half there, you're half not there when you're doing just repetitious works, and yeah. No,
Is it hard to let them go and to let them leave the studio?
No. They gotta go. I have to have room for more.
They have a good place to go.
I have to have room for more. Well, so the story about that for me is like, while I'm alive, I can always make another basket. When I'm gone, I won't need any baskets. So they always go, and that way I can always have something different and beautiful in the space that's new. And if I kept some, why would I make something new? You know what I mean? It's like, and when I say new, it's not another basket, it's a new version, it's the next iteration, or like, those are the things that really excite me, is when I can dream something up, figure out how to do it, and then make it real, and it's what I thought it could be, which a lot of times is, again, surprising. Yeah, it's enjoyable.
I want to switch subject and talk a little bit about the sculptures that you can see in the other room. There are a series of plexi poles that he made in 1968. And I'd love to go back to you, Laura, and ask you to help us understand them.
Right.
You know, some of the sculptures can really be seen as a sort of connection or like passage between some of his early works that were figurative to the abstraction of the band painting. So I'm just curious if you have any stories about them. They're very intriguing. You know, I think they can be read in many, many different ways. I can't help but thinking of André Cadere, the famous conceptual artist from Romania, who in the same years, in the 60s, made walking sticks that were completely different. They were made of wood, they were not necessarily precise, but he also played with the sort of a combination of and pattern of different colors. And his was certainly a conceptual gesture of taking the art objects outside of the gallery and walking with it, while for Zammitt, of course, it's more like an investigation into lights and color. But I wonder if you want to share your thoughts on these quite exciting pieces.
Sure, I'd be happy to. They came after the period of the serial abstract explorations that Cecilia had spoken of earlier, that were sculptures which were followed by these solid state sculptures, which are absolutely incredible. I encourage everyone to investigate his earlier work. But he had been with a very prestigious gallery on La Cienega in Los Angeles called Felix Landau. And Felix Landau really recognized Zammitt's merit very young as a student and had given him a stipend, which didn't happen that often. And if you were given a stipend, you were really in a well-secure place. So as the end of the 60s happened, and another dynamic that was happening in Southern California were the manufacturing, industrial, aeronautics. They really believed in artistic progress, so they were offering all types of residencies for artists. And suddenly that that manufacturing zeitgeist went under, and which ultimately affected the galleries. So Landau closed. There weren't very many financial opportunities, and he really wanted to explore the dialogue and interactions of color, and had no money, and went to the local signage companies and just asked for remnants, and started exploring color dialogue through what was available, which was recalibrating, but also they were meditations, I think, of, especially what Jeremy was referring to as almost an atavistic memory that sort of runs through. I mean, there is scientific proof of this. The epigenetics, there's a backstory to our DNA that has ancestral memory. And I think he was really intuitively exploring the dialogue of different colors set together and how they could have charged meanings. And although could never really fold into the nomenclature of minimal or hard edge, they do have what is common to hard edge in that the colors don't bleed. They're strong, definitive, well, some of them do, but the ones that he started with are definitive conversations between the symbolism of color interaction. And that ultimately leads him into thinking even more deeply of how to have gradations. So they're meditations, I think, on the universal symbolism that each color and color dialogue has.
Do you know actually how he made them?
Well, they were just laminated. He had his own, he had developed a clean room, which it's sort of a room where not a speck of dust could possibly ever enter. It's really what the scientists did in the aeronautics industrial sector would have, whereas you wanted to make sure that not even a speck of anything could enter, but he then had a laminating process that he invented to develop these, from what I've been told. And then what's really interesting, and you would probe this, is the fact that they're leaning. I mean, it's a dynamic, like, I asked his son Eric why he chose to have them leaning, and it was an afterthought, but it's an interesting afterthought because many of the light and space artists are doing this. I can't think of anything through history where artists were leaning, per se. But Peter Alexander, John McCracken have this proclivity to lean. And it's almost like it's sort of a unifying presentation that even, puts out the tentacles that he was part of a movement in that gesture.
That's interesting. Do you think it was also a way of expanding the scale of his sculptural works?
Or having a conversation with architecture. Sure. I mean, I think it's up to our own interpretations, but I can't definitively say because his son Eric was unsure about that. So,
Jeremy, do you want to comment on this?
I just had a thought. I like the way that the light plays off the wall. It kind of changes the whole. But no, when I saw them, I immediately thought of talking sticks or walking sticks, or again back to traditional knowledge. So I don't know if that relates at all. But, yeah. So that was just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Because it makes them less of a sculpture and more of like an object.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
Like something you laid against the wall because you're not using it right now.
Do you feel like they're performative objects? Meant to be used?
In some ways. Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, they look like props to me. Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah, because of the casual way they're leaning, I guess, waiting to be used. Don't know. They're mysterious for sure.
Do we know if he made many, Laura? Do you know if
he made between 30 and 50.
And they've always been shown like this, like leaning against?
I think he had them a bit more salon style, apparently, when they were shown in Hollywood. There's photos that give evidence that they're not as elegantly, per se, presented as we have them here at Karma. But I almost like them in the picture salon style as well. But I feel there's a more expansive way to explore the color dialogues by having room to breathe.
Great. I am moving to my almost last question. So if you start thinking about questions for our speakers, but I'd love to talk a little bit about innovation. Like many artists of his generation, Zammitt was part of the military. He served in the Air Force as an aerial reconnaissance photographer during the Korean War. So did John McCracken, who worked as a sonar operator in a submarine in the same years, in the 50s. Many artists, as Laura mentioned, from the light and space movement really drew from processes and technologies that were developed by the military, because of course they were often the first one to test out new technologies and new machines. Just to mention a few others, like Fred Eversley, who for these quite incredible lens works, which were actually made by using a turntable that originally was used to machine parts of the atomic bombs during the World War II. Of course, James Turrell, who was also a pilot. His father was an aeronautical engineer, and he used his technical background in many of his sophisticated installations. And then, of course, a long list of artists who use not necessarily technologies, but materials taken from military and aerospace industry, like John McCracken and his resin, the Wayne Valentine and his cast acrylic, Mary Course, and the microbeads. This is just to say that, of course, there was an excitement in testing out and in being able to use new technologies that were coming from a very different field. So, Laura, I would love for you to maybe just reflect a little bit more on this side, and also if you can point to maybe a specific contribution that you think Zammitt had, especially when it came to the intersection between art and science and technology.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, having explored the connections to aerospace and physics through many of the light and space artists, one could say many of them were Nepo babies. It's, many, Eversley, for example, is a good example of growing up with exposure to mathematical and scientific systems, and many of the artists like Larry John Dill, many others were had parents in aerospace. So Zammitt didn't. His father was a precision grinder, but he was exposed to technological developments, but he really embarked on learning the hard sciences independently. And you know, with the idea of there being where there's a will, there's a way, he developed a lot of things so that he could achieve his desired effects. One of them was being able to develop color that could be glued onto plastics, which up until then had been very challenging because there would be significant degradation. He developed chemical processes so color could be adhered. And these were things that impacted the industry at large. He developed a bubble-free lamination system. I mean, he was really making considerable strides. And along with his peers like Larry Bell, who was using a vacuum coating, and Dwayne Valentine, who had a show here 10 years ago in Chelsea, where if you've seen his work, I mean, his resins polyester resins are absolutely massive. You know, he developed a way for massive volume to cure, and that was the real challenge with light and space. It's the curing. It can take up to 30 years sometimes, but Dwayne innovated his own process that actually became Valentine mass cast, and the actual manufacturing industry was it was advanced through the artists. And that's a really, really important dynamic that reverberates to what artists can even do today.
Do you think there is something comparable to that excitement now? I mean, I will ask also the artists because, of course.
Yes.
But you go first.
I mean, one thing that I think is interesting, and we can't overlook the fact that plastics haven't been, you know, they've had an environmental impact that we can't deny. And I think with that insight, it's interesting that Zammitt moved on to the acrylic paintings, but also other artists who equally explored parabola, the parabolic formula. Fred Eversley had developed the parabola so that it could harness solar energy. He actually had innovated an idea where his sculptures were almost like architectural models to harness solar energy. And he had this incredible plan of just having this regenerative, natural kind of culture where we would be energy independent. And he had even equated those to ancient obelisks of Egypt. But there is a desire to work towards a sustainable future. So I just wanted to throw that in. Sorry.
And Jeremy and Sarah, maybe you can expand a bit on a general question, what does innovation mean to you? And Jeremy, thinking about your practice, you're taking a very ancient art form and you're radically innovating it. Have you ever been tempted by using more sophisticated technologies or other kind of technologies in your work?
Yeah, so early on, innovation was just refinement, going smaller than had been done, whether it's a small piece or smaller weaves, and then color, and then multiplying weaves on top of weaves. The thing with basket weaving is in essence, it's the simplest. It's just over under, and it's just this tension, So to make something that's basically ones and zeros, into this complex thing, it takes its iteration over and over and over and over again. But then when you think of the idea of moving beyond basketry into other forms, it's impossible to cast a basket, like to make a form of a basket without destroying it completely. So, the idea of using technology to maybe redesign the baskets in a different way.
Have you ever tried to 3D print one of your baskets?
What is it?
Have you ever tried to 3D print one of your baskets?
Yeah, that's a project that we're working on now is some bronze works and through technology. So basically redesign the whole thing and then print it, and then the technology coming into the work. But if you do it right, it becomes a sculpture of the work. But from a completely different angle. I just think that's so cool.
How do you feel about letting the control go?
I hated it at first, but really it's not about letting the control go. It's about, because it's still my designs and I'm still orchestrating the whole thing. It's just letting people that know how to do it better than I do facilitate me.
Makes sense. And for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I guess I've thought of for a long time that just painting and ceramics, it's, that's all I do, and and there's enough to explore within these two languages, and yes, it goes back for a very long time, these techniques, but lately I discovered, this is not going to be so surprising to most artists, but Photoshop. This is really cool. So I found this new technique.
It's obsolete technique from the 90s.
You thought I was going to say AI, right? I never would. So you take a photograph of a painting, and it's like a very loud red-orange painting, very monochrome, but bright colors. And then take a picture of it and put it in, and open it in Photoshop, and there's a button you can hit invert, and it inverts. It takes the exact, do you know what I'm talking about? It reverses whatever the exact opposite is of red-orange is, which is like a kind of maybe it's like the teal green that's in the painting, the green one. It like takes that painting and in all its brushiness and it reverses it. And so I can see what that painting looks like on the exact opposite of the color spectrum, which I would have had to have used my brain to do that, or it would have taken a long time. But it's this really, so there's these tricks that I think are okay to use, and of course they're okay to use, but they're actually really interesting, and like, now I want to do a whole show of just inversions. Like, make a bunch of paintings and then invert them all, and then show only just show the inversions. And
that's interesting.
like, I did that once with one painting in a recent show in Paris, and the inversion of this beautiful cerulean blue was this crap green, it was actually called crap green, and it's like an olive, brown, green, yellowish, but the painting was great in the end. So I think technology can do great things for us Luddites.
Well, that's a great ending, but thank you everybody for participating, and